Hello, hello. Welcome to TPS Roundtable Saturday night. We have a couple of people in to see us and speak with us tonight about mortgage fraud and IRS tax lawsuits. The cartoon we just watched is obviously an early preconditioning acceptance of something that shouldn't be done. Welcome back, Noble. I'm going to turn the mic over to Doc, Sky, Randy, and David. Enjoy the night.
Well, good evening. I'm not sure who should be starting this. My name is David, and Randy's with me. And that video that you just watched is a very clear example of where things have taken a divergence over the last 70 years, starting with the propaganda of the general government. And we'll talk a little bit about this. What we wanted to do tonight is to give a high-level view, if you will, starting with the concept of what we're really attempting to accomplish by everything that we're discussing here, and what we're seeing is starting to become a groundswell all over the country, and that is the ability to restore liberty throughout our land, freedom and liberty, from the grassroots, from the bottom up, not from the top down, because it can never happen from the top down. And what we wanted to try to accomplish here this evening is to give everybody a bit of an overview of what we are attempting to do as part of what many Americans and many people all over the world are attempting to do. This isn't just an American issue anymore. There are people from the Greenwich Mean Time line going east and going west all the way around the planet that are attempting to restore liberty because it is a part of the human condition to desire liberty. And so we're just one small piece of this. We met up with Jen and her website just last week, and obviously immediately felt a common resonance that we just would like to share from our point of view and see if it might be helpful. We represent a internet-based organization called Tools for Justice, and you can go to our website, toolsforjustice.com, and learn more about what we're trying to do. And you'll find, I see Jen did put up the link, and that was really helpful. The website is still in a process, and I think they always are, but we'll be doing some things in the next few weeks that are going to get the attention of literally millions of Americans, because we're going to be addressing two very significant control frauds that have been put in place by the general government upon the American people, and it is about to be, both of these are about to be exposed, not just from the standpoint of knowledge, but from the standpoint of legal activism. One of our little phrases that we use at Tools for Justice is that we're building an army of legal activists restoring the American dream. And that is what Tools for Justice is about. We're done protesting. We want to start prosecuting. And so if you have any interest in that, then I think you're going to find the things that we're sharing this evening will be of some benefit. The other things that we are participating in are issues having to do with election fraud. There's something that will be coming out shortly, even dealing with some of the current issues that are going on in this country with the primaries and some of the things that are happening where there's been clearly illegal activities going on, and we need to bring this to the attention of the powers that be, if you will, to make sure that it stops and that those perpetrators who have committed illegal activities are brought to justice just like anybody else would be. One of the things we're trying to accomplish here is that we would return to a sound social order within the United States, and literally that would flesh out into the rest of the world as well. And so that's kind of a general overview of where we hope to go this evening. In a moment, I'm going to put a link up here, and I think probably Sky Blue Eyes or somebody will make it available that we can watch a second video. And this is a video that we've put together. And forgive me that it's not available. We literally are waiting for a friend of ours who's working on it to get the link to us so that we can put it up. And so I'll be back to you. And the goodness is we can continue to talk until it's available, and it'll fit in fine with whatever point we're at in the discussions. I'm going to turn the mic over to Randy and let him continue the conversation. And one of the questions I have is, do you people see us in the video chat section of this too? And so I should be sitting in front of the video, or does that matter to people? I just want to, accommodate in whatever way it's necessary. There's two of us on one. Oh yeah, so you see Randy. Well, I'm David. Hi everybody. I'm off on the side here. So we'll just kind of try to poke our heads in every once in a while, and we'll just continue our discussion as we go. So I'm going to turn this over to Randy, give him the headset, and he can continue the conversation. Okay, here we go, Randy.
Hello, folks. We started Tools for Justice in the context of already having conducted 8.5 years of litigation regarding bank fraud and IRS fraud, and at this point, that is where we have substantially 7 years of average of 50 hours a week litigating against substantially the U.S. Department of Justice Tax Division. And literally we've been going up against an entire team of attorneys who have been working for years to defeat our research and litigation efforts to ultimately publicly establish what the truth is regarding federal constitutional taxation and regarding the Internal Revenue Code, and in addition to those 7 years, we now have a solid 4 years with some overlap in that time. There's been 9 years total, but a solid 4 years involving litigation of bank issues. And both of these areas are many faceted, but what we have learned regarding the IRS matters is that the most important federal tax case in the history of the United States of America occurred in 1796, and that Supreme Court case is called U.S. versus Hylton, and it's Hylton. The case is marginally reported, but it's poorly reported, and so that anybody researching conventional case law will not know the importance of that case or what is actually there. It wasn't until 2003 that Volume 7 of an 8-volume set entitled United States Supreme Court Cases 1791 through 1800 was published. And that Volume 7 of the 8-volume set covered the year 1796, the Supreme Court cases in 1796. And it was literally impossible for the general public to know about that case and what was there until the year 2003. And of course, it takes some time for people who are not attorneys or legal researchers working with a specific focus in a certain area to learn about these things. I believe I first learned about the set of these these legal books in 2006, possibly 2007, and I have incorporated that into my own memorandums and my clients' memorandums in litigation. The reason that case is so important is because the issues of indirect and direct taxation in the Constitution were fully argued. And they weren't just argued by anybody. The attorney representing the United States of America before the Supreme Court was Alexander Hamilton. And he was a framer and signer of the Constitution. He, of course, was also the first Secretary of the United States Treasury. And, of course, he was appointed to office by George Washington. All of the Supreme Court justices at that time were appointed to office by George Washington. And two of them, Justices Wilson and Patterson, were also framers and signers of the Constitution. And what we had in that case is that the Supreme Court's decision, both in the appellate court and then also, or in the appellate court and then the Supreme Court, were unanimous, upholding the United States position regarding direct and indirect taxation under the Constitution. But what's curious is the Department of Justice Tax Division and the Internal Revenue Service and the United States Treasury, both at least publicly and in their argument in litigation, substantially hold an opposite position as what the federal government held back in 1796. And so our position is the same as what the framers of the Constitution actually were, as found in the Hylton case. There's another aspect that's very important, and that's the Internal Revenue Code itself. The Internal Revenue Code is written in such a way that it was intended that it never be understood. And we did something that we were not supposed to do. We cracked the Internal Revenue Code. And that would have, in fact, been impossible were it not for modern computer, internet research tools, researching the code, and then people networking, and people like ourselves who have, committed many years, sometimes decades, to reading case law and so forth, just attempting to learn the truth. And to my knowledge, none of them who went before us actually fully did crack the code. If they did, there's nothing public to show it. But we actually have. And what we are about to release on YouTube, which will go viral, will be, for the first time in the history of the world, actually, of a straightforward explanation of the Internal Revenue Code and of the federal employment taxes and how they relate to us, and together with an explanation of how the Internal Revenue Service has been systematically misapplying those employment taxes against us to substantially rob us of approximately a quarter of our income, and for the last 70 years. How we intend to tackle this problem is twofold. First, we began with a criminal complaint against the IRS agents, and we went to the FBI a little over 3 months ago and filed, and the agent who interviewed us for like 2.5 hours, he submitted a report, and he just told us to wait for the FBI Public Corruption Division to get back to us. We're still waiting regarding their investigation of the IRS. But something else has happened in the meantime, and it was overlapping our going to the FBI. About 7 months ago, I came to understand that the actual true nature and seriousness of the foreclosure problems that we're facing. And before the banks, it isn't just the national banks, but in particular, it was their executives and corrupt executives, which unfortunately is substantially most of them. They worked together effectively to change the Uniform Commercial Code. And this was, they did this about 15 years ago. And then the states adopted the Uniform Commercial Code as changed. And with those changes, and then with the case law which has followed, such as here in Florida, the state of Florida case law on the Uniform Commercial Code provisions of the Florida statutes says this, that a party, I'll back up, the traditional promissory note and mortgage, which were traditionally never separated, are now treated, for practical purposes, as it's okay for them to be separated. And a party that doesn't even produce a mortgage can enforce a note. And the case law says that a party who has possession of the note, who does not own the note, and who does not inform the court or the parties who is the owner of the note, can foreclose on a mortgage. And so that situation puts us substantially all at risk to foreclosure if we have a mortgage. And the reality of the mortgages is that there have been millions of foreclosures thus far, but that is actually, believe it or not, just the beginning. By the year 2014, we're going to see another wave of foreclosures, and it will be enormous. And so what I did is I took the 3 years of research I'd already done, and I came to some conclusions. And one of the conclusions was that the liar's loan enterprise, or the people who were creating liar's loans within the mortgage industry, they created the housing bubble. And what a liar's loan is a stated income loan with no income verification, no documentation or very little documentation, no underwriting, a false and inflated appraisal overstating the property value and the bank's misrepresentation of that property value. And then there's a false and understated loan-to-value ratio found in the loan documents themselves. And let's see, I think that covers what a liar's loan is. Basically, it's an absolutely, utterly fraudulent loan. And now banks have no fiduciary duty to us, according to case law. But they do have a duty to comply with federal regulations, statutes and regulations. There's Title 12 banks and banking. And Title 12 requires national mortgage lenders to obtain a USPAP compliant appraisal in connection with any federally regulated or related, transaction, which would normally, require an appraisal. The definitions go further, but basically, what it comes down to is the liar's loans were made by the millions, and there were between 2001 and 2008, there was on the order of 1 million, an average, I would say, of 1 million liar's loans per year within that period. And what that did is that put in the neighborhood of $500 billion per year into the real estate market or housing market that normally wouldn't be there. And pumping all that money into the market together with mortgage lenders pressuring appraisers to meet the numbers in the loan documents or be blacklisted resulted in the inflation of the entire housing market, not only nationally, but actually worldwide in various localities, whole countries, depending on what their statutes were and then their securities laws and mortgage lending laws and allowable practices. And so what I have done is I have written a federal civil RICO or racketeering complaint for mortgage fraud for violating, initially it's the state of Florida mortgage fraud statutes, but we're going to take this out to 50 states. And I suspect that the same general lawsuit template will be taken worldwide, because it's really the same scam that was conducted worldwide. And not all localities, but anyway, with this civil RICO complaint for mortgage fraud, we're working with an attorney, and thus far with that particular attorney, we have submitted 3 settlement discussions or negotiations or demand letters with a printed, bound, and tabbed civil RICO complaint, which has not been filed yet. These complaints, by the way, are 35 pages of technical pleading with 290 pages of exhibits, and then printed, bound, and tabbed. It's a very formidable document. Anyway, if these 3 settlement demands which have been submitted thus far, 3 out of 3, the bank's attorneys are negotiating a settlement with us. And the attorney we're working with is very bright, very skilled, and he said in 31 years of litigating cases involving mortgage foreclosure, he has never before seen the bank so eager to settle. In fact, he has never even observed a bank ever willing to settle prior to submitting these settlement demands. So that says quite a bit about the power of the civil RICO complaint. It it's not only properly written to where it's legally sufficient and factually sufficient, it goes to the root of the problem. Before we ever had foreclosure fraud, or before we ever had mortgage servicer fraud, or before we ever had securities or derivatives fraud, we had mortgage fraud. But strangely enough, you can search the internet, you can search the case law, you can search high and low. You will not find an effective complaint for mortgage fraud. If there's one out there, I wasted 1,000 hours writing this thing. And what we're planning on doing is taking our criminal complaint with affidavit in support and memorandum in support against the IRS, and we're going to put it in a civil RICO format. And it literally took 7 years of litigating these IRS issues and pushing out in every direction imaginable or possible to try to get remedy, to finally come to the place to realize that we can use federal civil RICO effectively against the IRS. And so, yeah, we're definitely excited about this, and we're not very far out from having our civil RICO complaint written, because the backbone of civil RICO has already been executed successfully, and the criminal complaint against the IRS is also, it's successful in its content. It's just a matter of integrating the two. Now, those are two major areas that we're addressing, but we're also working in other ways. David, for example, last week made like a 45-minute or an hour presentation to his representative, state of Florida representative in Tallahassee, and regarding the power of the purse and the power of the sword. The power of the purse, in terms of practical application, is ultimately getting the state of Florida to adopt the North Dakota model of having a state bank. And North Dakota's had a state bank for 90 years. North Dakota is in the black. Now, we're in a recession. North Dakota is doing financially fine. And the reason being is, with having a state bank, they both balance investing into the economy as well as lending into the economy. If you only lend to an economy, what happens is you create an interest debt, which ultimately can never be paid. But if you also invest into the economy, you can balance the two, and what that does is it stabilizes the currency. And so in order to have a stable currency which does not inflate and is substantially remains as an equal way to measure, if you will, for use in trade, you simply need to manage the currency properly. It doesn't have to be backed by gold. It doesn't have, truthfully, it doesn't have to be backed by anything other than the full faith and credit of the people and the government. A fiat currency is a government issued currency. And I used to think that was inferior to a precious metal or commodity-backed currency. But when I look at examples, when I look examples around the world and throughout history, I find that when the currency is managed, when it's a public currency, not a private currency, it works very well for the people. You can look at China as an example. They manage their banks and the currency very well, and as a result, they have steady growth, and in terms of taking a essentially a third world country and developing it into a first world country, they're actually doing very, very well. What we have is the worst of all worlds, because we have the Federal Reserve System, which is a private banking system which utilizes the government's printing presses and powers of making money. And so you have this private body that, for all practical purposes, has complete statutory immunity and absolutely zero accountability. They do whatever they want. And when you look at their economic monetary policy, what they do and how they do it, they are raping and pillaging the people of the United States and of the world with the way that they're managing the Federal Reserve note. There are several examples of where there was a private currency, where there was a national, private currency, and then they went back to a public currency and prospered. One example is when Abraham Lincoln issued greenbacks, and which was a government-issued currency, and it was a fiat currency, and it actually pulled the nation out of recession after the Civil War. Now, in general, I don't like Lincoln with what I know of him. He did a lot of very bad things, but he did some good things. Another example would be Iceland. Iceland was in substantially the same position as Greece, but they took a completely different approach. Iceland was smart. They used the referendum and initiative direct democracy tools of Switzerland to say no to essentially monetizing or nationalizing the private debt. They said that the private bankers could take a hike. In fact, they said, we're going to prosecute those in government that allowed this to happen. And they literally extradited their president back from Europe and prosecuted him, and others. I don't have much in terms of details there, but the Icelandic people also are creating a new constitution, and they're doing it online. They're using the internet, and they're allowing their teenagers to participate in creating a new constitution. But another thing that they're doing that's vitally important to their recovery is they have adopted the North Dakota State Bank model for banking. And that's an essential part of their recovery, and they're recovering quickly. Another example, it's mind-boggling, but actually it is true. When you look at Germany in the early 1930s, they were in a deep, horrible depression, similar to the depression in the United States and much of or most of the world. Only with Germany, it was worse because Germany had participated in World War I, and the treaty that they were forced into made, let's see, it says CIO is what? I'm not sure what was said here, but the we've heard. Well, Germany was put in the position of having to pay out literally 3 times its entire national worth of all its property as a World War I debt. And so Germany was put into the position of Greece or Iceland. So and they had a privately controlled money system similar to our Federal Reserve, and with money speculation, and together with the position that Germany was in, they were put into a position where they had to print money 24/7 to pay off this impossible debt. That, together with money speculation, where private investors were essentially doing put options and or shorting the money, and they were making money off of that. Literally, they destroyed the national currency. So when you come to 1933, and when Hitler came onto the scene, Hitler was a socialist. And what he did is he socialized the money system. And I used to have a negative view of socialism, but when I have observed a socialized money system, it actually, as long as it's managed well, it always works well. I mean, it works amazingly well. And literally what happened with Germany was, with the way they managed their money system, which was under Hitler, but was, way before any war again, Germany went from the worst, most impoverished debtor nation in Western Europe to the most financially successful and stable country in Western Europe within a period of 5 years. And it was because of they had a public socialized money system, which in reality is actually in part, not completely so, but essentially that North Dakota state bank model. And I really didn't know it until just recently, but Hitler was he was preparing for war, but not for the reasons that we have typically been taught. What was it? Was it 11 years or 22 years prior to Hitler becoming, coming into power, if you will? The communist Russia was growing. There was a communist revolution, and that created a very real threat to Germany. And Germany was, in fact, under all-out attack by Jewish bankers. And this was international. It was Jewish financial interest worldwide, and it was public knowledge. It was published in newspapers. The Jewish financiers declared war on Germany, and Hitler did not want war, but when he was forced into war, he was an opportunist, and he no doubt had his warts, but in certain respects, I don't think he's the monster that he's made out to be. Whether I don't believe he's a saint, but I find as I study history, things are often not what we are taught. But Hitler is not an issue. The reason I'm saying this is we need to look at history in terms of the banking system and the benefits, and managing government and managing our money system, and then also using the inherent powers that people have to investigate and prosecute crime. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and you look at the Constitution in this country, which was literally the second Constitution. The Articles of Confederation were actually the first Constitution. But when you look at all that, pre-existing to all that, people actually had what were recognized as common law rights. And stemming from the tradition, historical tradition of British common law. And most of the countries in the world actually have a British common law system of government. And it's actually not what most people think it is either. And I don't know if this is the time to go into that. But the yeah, there's a lot of history here. And I think I'm losing my track here, where I was going. Let's get back to the point of the okay, actually, as far as the government. Oh, we have when the government was created in this country, people had pre-existing rights of investigation and prosecution of crime. And so when the Constitution was created, literally 80% of all crime was investigated and prosecuted, both, by private grand juries. And when you look at the Constitution, it in the declaratory and restrictive clauses, or what we call the Bill of Rights, there's reference to the grand jury, but the grand jury was not written into the Constitution as a check or balance to government, because it was just taken for granted that it was. See, the framers created what they were proud of, this so-called three branches of government as checks and balances to each other. But at that time, there was a bigger check or balance to all three of them, and that was the grand jury. And what has happened through history is that the government has increasingly usurped the grand jury powers, but we still have them. And basically they're lying there dormant, and we have the powers of prosecution. We literally have the powers of what's called prosecution ex rel or ex relator, and to where private individuals or attorneys can come in and act as a private attorney general on behalf of the government and to prosecute criminals. And the way this works is that the way the law is written and practiced is we have, when we file a complaint, the government and government prosecutors has the first right of refusal to prosecute, but they have no duty of care to prosecute the crime. And so we have the right to prosecute the crime if the government chooses not to. And so that's part of where we need to get to, and we're working on ways to get to where we can overcome the obstacles or barriers to prosecuting the criminals, both in government and those who are protected by the government, including the government regulators that do nothing to regulate the criminals. An example of this is the liar's loans that caused the housing bubble, the mortgage crisis, and the financial crisis could have been prevented by the Federal Reserve chairman. They both Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan have had powers that were given to the Federal Reserve back in 1993 to regulate and to stop liar's loans. And it wasn't until 2008, after the trillions of dollars of damage was done to millions and millions of people, that Ben Bernanke said there'll be no more liar's loans. Anyway, we're working to find ways to utilize our power and to create change. We will also be going to creating more RICO suits for the other issues. I think Dave's wanting to talk here, so I'm done.
Well, as you can see, Randy can bring a lot of good stuff to the table to aid in the discussion. There's a couple of different ways we could go at this point. One would be, I would like to offer that we watch another video. And this video is turning the corner a little bit in that we've spent most of the time up until now talking about the issues surrounding mortgage fraud and the banks. But going back to my original introduction, what we are attempting to do is to awaken, or what I call bring about an awakening and an enlightenment of our fellow Americans to the real issue here is how do we restore liberty by not just protesting but prosecuting. We need to stop the protesting and start prosecuting. And so I had given a link to Sky Blue Eyes, and I don't know whether she got it and is in a position to bring up that other video. But we'd like to share with you the video that we are about to prepare and put out virally. And this video, this is the first half of a presentation that we are putting together. Give me just a second and I'll explain. I'll give the context here, Sky Blue, and then you can go ahead and run it. The context of this is a two-part video, which essentially what we are doing is we are exposing the control fraud of the misapplication of the federal employment taxes. This has been going on for 70 years, and that little Donald Duck movie that we showed at the beginning was our attempt to help people to understand the extent to which the federal government changed the mindset of the American people. Back in 1939, there was a major revision of the federal tax code. The income tax had been put in place initially way back at the beginning of actually it was in the second year of the Civil War by Lincoln. And it was only imposed for a couple of years, and then it went dormant until the 1890s. The Pollock decision came in, and the Supreme Court declared certain sections of the Pollock decision unconstitutional, and there began to be what I'll call a pissing contest between the Congress and the Supreme Court. And it had to do with the issue of what was directly taxed by the Pollock, by the federal income tax statutes that were argued in Pollock. By the time the 16th Amendment was put in place in 1913, a lot of the reasons for that amendment actually were adjusted by the court. And so it really did not carry any significant change of weight in terms of how the income tax was to be applied. The point I'm trying to make here is that the government then in the late 1930s, 1939, brought all of the tax laws together into the federal income tax statutes of 1939. Over half of them actually were prior to Pollock, and those were all combined into Title 26. And in doing so, there essentially has been no change in the federal income tax or federal employment tax statutes from 1939 to the present time. However, in 1939, according to a link that you'll see within the video we're about to show you, two economists from Berkeley, Sayez and Piketty, actually did research showing that in 1939, only 13.1%, that's 13.1% of the American people filed a federal income tax return. 6 years later, at the end of the Second World War, in 1946, 89.1% of the American people filed a federal income tax return, and it has stayed at that level ever since. The point is that it was a propaganda campaign and a pressure by the federal government through the Internal Revenue Service and their actions in threatening the American people that forced the change in what we view as the federal employment tax today. And yes, it was a fraud. And Doc, what we're attempting to do by showing you this video is help you to understand how the people of this country are going to fix this fraud. We have cracked the code. This is the first half of explaining how people can understand this. And this is going to go viral literally within a week. And when it does, this is going to cause an incredible amount of conversation and action. The RICO complaint that we're writing at the present time will be available to everybody in this country within 30 days. And when it is going to cause a groundswell that is going to continue the awakening that's happening in this country. The sleeping giant is about to wake up significantly, in my opinion, and it's just an opinion. Don't take anything that we say as fact. Every single one of you and each of us is responsible for our own lives and determining what is true and what is not, and what is legally valid and what is not. All we're trying to do is put information out there that will help people to understand. Will the documents be open source and freely copyable and distributable? Generally speaking, yes. There will be some, requirements. We would ask you to become a member of Tools for Justice. We, will give certain aspects of advice on how to pursue, whatever you're going to do. But listen, what this is about is restoring liberty. That's all we're about. We want to restore liberty. And this is part of the way. The beautiful part is, as you'll see from what we're explaining, the average American, and by the way, we're talking about as many as 70 million Americans are affected by this. When those 70 million Americans start filing these RICO civil fraud cases at triple damages, you're going to see the ramifications very quickly when you watch this video. So, Sky, I turn it over to you. Go ahead and let's start running it, and just sit back and relax. This literally was created and edited and prepared. You are the first to see this of anybody in the country. So just enjoy the watch, and we'll get back and talk when it's over.
Is the first half really an introduction to the issue, and then the second video actually goes into the code and gives a technical explanation?
But explain the second video is not going to be available for a few days.
Yeah, the second video won't be available for a few days. So that's where the actual explanation of the code is. So, but the first video gives a good introduction to the issue and gets you primed. Here, David.
Go ahead and roll it, Sky.